Hi everyone, I hope you're having a great spring break so far. I know you're about halfway through and perhaps you're dreading coming back, but I hope that you have had a good spring break so far. And from our last video, I hope really that you had an opportunity to encounter God. And today we're going to focus on John chapter 11 as one of the main passages, and perhaps the next 2-3 days that you have left before you come back, that you can spend some time on those words and see what God has for you. It's a really interesting passage, a chapter actually, because it talks about when Jesus was in the midst of things and he gets this news about one of his friends, Lazarus, and he was sick, and he was very sick. And so out of desperation, Mary and Martha sends a message to Jesus that his friend Lazarus is sick. And that was enough for Jesus, really for him to come back and perhaps do something about it, because obviously Mary and Martha have seen Jesus do miracles, and perhaps they thought maybe in this moment Jesus is one who can really help their brother. But interestingly enough, when you read this passage, you'll notice that Jesus doesn't pick up and just right away go to Mary and Martha to the village of Bethany, but he seems to take his time. And he took so much time such that after a while Lazarus had died. And can you imagine the tragedy? Can you imagine how disappointed Mary and Martha were when they see their brother has died and Jesus was not even close to coming to their house and to where they live? And so in this moment, in this tragedy in some ways, Jesus finally says, okay, we're going to go. And in knowing that it's too late, that Lazarus had already died. And so in this story, what's so interesting is that it makes me think about why would Jesus do that? But when I look at life of Jesus over on the ministry of Jesus, one thing that I notice is that he seems to have this sense of tremendous composure and peace about things. That even in the midst of his busyness, of his schedule, he somehow seems able to be able to balance things. He's not in a rush to get from one place to another, but he seems to always be in control of his schedule in some ways. And it really helps me to think about it in some ways. It makes me think about this. Is that how did he know? Is it just because he's a son of God and he knew all events that was going to happen ahead of time? Or is it just because he had power to change things that he was always in that way sense in control of things? But what's amazing is that over and over again, we see this happen. And I think one thing that comes to my mind is this, is that no matter what, Jesus seems to know what his mission was, okay? Where he was headed, what he's really about, why he is in this world. And when I say that, that's not an easy thing to do, because I know that a lot of us, we don't think about mission and vision of life, things like that. But believe it or not, you and I, we all have a mission, okay? It might not be what you want it to be or what you thought it, but mission, if you think about it, or vision for life is simply this. What is it that you are really focusing on in your life? What is it that you are really pursuing? What is kind of the end goal of your life in some ways? What are you really investing your time, life, resources into? What are you spending your energy kind of doing in some ways in life, right? And so when you start to think about that and just reflect on it a little bit, for instance, there are people in this world, even though they would never say it this way, their mission in life is to make as much money as possible. Now, no one's going to say that, no one's going to think that way or would pursue that. But when you look at all that they do in their life, their schedule, where the energy is invested, all their time and everything, it really is focused on just that. Or some people, maybe it's their mission in life to spend as much time online. Now, once again, no one's going to think that and say that, but it seems like that's what you look forward to the most. That's what you enjoy the most. That's what you spend most of your life doing. And so it's not so much really the true vision of your life or mission of your life, but what is maybe even things that you do in life that kind of point in that direction. And so when I look at that, I think Jesus, if anyone, has such a clear understanding and a clear focus on his vision and mission. And some people say, well, what was Jesus' mission and vision? And some people will say, well, his vision and mission was to save the world. If you really think about it, that was not his vision and mission. Jesus really had one mission and one vision for life. And if you think about it, you know what that is? Is that his vision, his mission was to simply die on the cross for all of humanity. You see, I think because he knew that and he was so focused on his vision and mission, I think he was able to resist moments when he could have collapsed under pressure. You know, when you see that his friend Lazarus is very sick, you know, how do you resist running after him and trying to, you know, be of help to that person? Or when you see in ministry, as he was doing ministry, that he'll see a blind person see, and somebody who's never walked or he hasn't walked in his life for a long time start to walk again. How do you resist focusing your ministry on just ministry of healing, you know, or ministry of feeding the poor? You know, how do you resist those moments? And Jesus, for some reason, over and over again, as I stated, was able to do that. He seems so focused on his mission and vision for his life. Okay? And as I talk about this, I want you to think about, and as you read John chapter 11 and reflect on that, I want you to think about in your life, what is your vision and mission for life? Perhaps, you know, that can change over the years, but right now, what is your ultimate vision and mission? Okay? You know, for some of you, perhaps getting to the next step in your education or finding a job or things like that is the ultimate mission and vision, at least for this moment. But is that what God would have you to focus your life on right now? Or should that be more of a side thing that you do on top of another vision, a vision that should be in your life? I want you to think about for a moment, and if you really are struggling trying to figure this out, just look at where do you spend most of your resources, your time, your energy, your money, and you know what, even when you talk with people, what's one topic that seems to come up a lot all the time? What's one topic that seems to, you know, be always in your conversation? And sometimes when I especially see singles, for instance, in a ministry or in any kind of gathering setting, one thing I notice is that people at some point or other tend to talk about finding a future spouse. Okay? And so you know what? Those are kind of ways that you can figure out for yourself what is the real ultimate mission and vision of your life. Okay? And I want you to just spend some moment thinking about that. And perhaps, you know, right now, as all of you are perhaps in school right now, maybe your mission and vision is to just get through this year, because maybe you didn't do well last semester or the year before, and now you're really trying to kind of make up for that. Some of you are really focused as maybe juniors, seniors, thinking about, are you going to grad school? Are you going to be able to get the residency or internship that you need to get to a place in your profession where you want to be? Okay? As you think about those things, you know, you have to realize those are such short-term, short-lived goals of your life. And I think what God would have you to do is think bigger and broader than that. And perhaps focus your energy even right now on that bigger, broader vision of what your life should be. And when I say that, I don't mean your vision should be like, I want to be a missionary for Jesus somewhere, or, you know, I want to do ministry in this way. But I want you to think about what are some really important values in your life. You know, what are some things that, you know, perhaps the way God has gifted you, the way that God has given you certain talents in your life. What are those things perhaps pointing to? And I know that for the past couple of weeks on Sundays, I've been trying to get at that a little bit as we talked about the 4 core values of our church, is that instead of just focusing on, you know, does God want me to be an engineer or a lawyer or doctor or whatever, you know, instead of those things, I keep pointing to and alluding to the fact that perhaps there's something bigger in life that God is asking you to pursue. And those things, in terms of what you do as your job or profession, perhaps is not all that God has in mind for you. And so in that way, as you start to just spend the next 2-3 days, and because it's going to take more than just a moment of reflection, and sometimes you'll be surprised that maybe you'll think about this tonight or today, you know, depending on when you're watching this video, and you might not get anything. And then suddenly, as you're doing something tomorrow, in the middle of your activity, or maybe even just having a dinner with a friend, something might just come to your mind. Okay? And so in that way, this is not just about this 30-minute devotion or 1-hour devotion or 15-minute devotion that you're doing, that perhaps you'll get an answer to something like this. But as you open yourselves up to the voice of God in some ways, and wisdom of God, insight from God, you might get that. You might get a bigger picture and understanding of perhaps something that God has in mind for you. And you might discover it might not be anything close to what your primary gifts might be. It might not be anything close to maybe even the interest that you have had so far. in terms of what you like doing things. But you might discover further down in your life that that really is more about who you are. And over again, I discovered that about myself, that sometimes I keep thinking that if I can just have this, or if I can just experience this in my life, that would be one thing that I want to do. And then when that happens, I realize that's not what I ultimately wanted. And so over and over again, life is kind of, in some ways, is a life of discovery. And once again, if you don't get this within the next 2-3 days, your life's not going to come to a standstill. Your life's not going to come to an end, or you're going to miss somehow the mission of your life. But I think it's one topic worthwhile, especially as you're home and not in the middle of the busy schedule of school. Maybe it's an opportunity for you to reflect on bigger picture of life and look at life of Jesus from this perspective. How he would say over and over again, his will is to do the will of the Father. And I think, once again, Jesus knew so clearly, what he was about, that he was willing to do that. He wasn't going to somehow sidestep or alter the vision that God has given him. He could have started a ministry of healing. He could have started a ministry for the poor. He could have started a ministry of teaching even. And he could have done so many things, but over and over again, we see Jesus just so focused. And he says it over and over again, no one's going to take my life, but I give my life freely. So he knew ultimately what his life was about. And I'm not sure if he knew clearly how the world was going to get saved. He just knew that his mission was to die for the sins of mankind. And the Father has sent him to do that job more than anything else. And so in the midst of that, he did heal a lot of people. He did do a tremendous amount of teaching, and he really helped people to see God in some ways. But if you look at it, those are all the peripheral things, side things in some ways, compared to the ultimate mission of his life was that he died on the cross. And we're going to celebrate that when you come back to school on a Good Friday service that we're going to have on campus. I want you to think about that as you come back, as you think about coming back, okay? And think about the mission of Jesus, and I want you to think about your mission in life, okay? What is it that you ultimately do? And you might, it has to be bigger and broader than just, oh, I want to go to some place, Southeast Asia, and be a missionary. That's too specific. Okay? I want you to think about even a broader thing. Perhaps thinking about, what I really enjoy is I enjoy spending time with people. I enjoy not just spending time with people, I enjoy doing this with people. Okay? Or I enjoy inventing things, I enjoy whatever, those kind of things. Broader topics of life that perhaps will point you in the direction that God has, why God has created you. And so just look at John 11, and it's a long chapter, and so perhaps it might take pieces of it, maybe 10 verses at a time, and just reflect on that and just really dig into that story. It's a tremendous event that takes place where Lazarus dies and he is resurrected. Okay? Can you imagine that, what that was like? And when you read through the chapter, one other thing that's interesting that I hope you catch is the tremendous amount of emotion. Okay? The Mary and Martha, the disappointment and the joy and the entire spectrum of emotion and experiences that they go through in this time, which is so interesting, exciting to see. And so I want you to think about that, reflect on it, and just really spend some time with God before you come back, and be ready for the season of Easter and this, as we come to an end of Lent as well. I want you to be ready for Easter and the celebration that's going to take place. And I hope that you just enjoy the rest of your spring break, and I hope to see you when you come back.